Schools from the Pac-12, Big Ten, and SEC have reached out to Maalik Murphy about transferring. Interesting.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we talk about the tampering that's going on with Maalik Murphy. We talk about the Texas basketball team, where Rodney Terry is hot on the recruiting trail, bringing in 2 transfers since the last time we spoke. And then we talk about the Texas baseball team coming off a tough loss to TCU. They do face off against Kansas at Kansas in a true Friday, Saturday, Sunday weekend series. We discuss all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before I talk about Maalik Murphy, I want to give a quick shout out to Horns 24/7 and 24/7 Sports. They do such a good job with their long stories highlighting players and coaches, and they did 2 really good stories on Maalik Murphy, just talking about the transfer portal, NIL, and what life has been like for Maalik Murphy since he made himself a household name at the spring game in the midst of 2 other household names in our quarterback room, Quinn, Ewers, and Arch Manning. So if you get a chance, go check out those stories on Horns 24/7 Sports, one by Chip Brown and one by Chris Hummer on Maalik Murphy. And when you talk about the Maalik Murphy story, it starts with his sophomore year in high school, right, where he was a backup, even though he was already one of the top-ranked quarterbacks in the state of California, right, as a sophomore. And so many people are telling Maalik Murphy, hey, you should transfer to another high school, right, where you can play immediately, instead of settling for the gimmick 2-quarterback system that his coach came up with, where the starting quarterback, who is now at UNLV, would play 2 drives, and then Maalik Murphy would come in every 3rd drive, right? That's what Maalik Murphy settled for his sophomore year of high school, where he could have gone to a bunch of different places and played right away. And people are constantly telling him, hey, you need to move on and go play somewhere else. And he said, no, I'm going to stay here and compete. And that led to him winning a state championship his senior year in high school. So now let's fast forward the Maalik Murphy story to picking his college decision. And he entertained some schools, but he took a lot of schools off his list. The first school that he really locked into and said, I could see myself playing there, was Ohio State. And it's funny, the Ohio State-Texas connection, because we took Terrence Brooks from Ohio State, right? Anthony Cook was probably headed to Ohio State. We took him. Not Zeke. Bijan Robinson said he was going to Ohio State, but ended up at Texas. And now we know that Maalik Murphy was likely headed to Ohio State as well. Thankfully, he's in the burnt orange and white. But he's headed to Ohio State, or at least that's his thought process, until Quinn Ewers reclassifies and commits to Ohio State. And so in Maalik Murphy's mind, he says, I can't go to Ohio State because that's Quinn Ewers' job in the future. And so he takes Ohio State off the list. And as you'll see from the rest of the Maalik Murphy story, this is probably the one time that he did not bet on himself. And I'm, of course, glad he's at the University of Texas. But when you look at the situation, he didn't go to Ohio State because of Quinn Ewers, the same Quinn Ewers that never threw a pass in a game at Ohio State. Maalik Murphy very well could be the starter at Ohio State this year if he stayed with his first mind, throwing to the #1 wide receiver room in the country per on 3. So now he has to settle for, checks notes, the 2nd ranked wide receiver room in the country per on 3. So he ends up choosing the University of Texas, right? His quarterback coach, who he's been with since the 4th grade, calls Steve Sarkisian when he gets the job at Texas and says, hey, I got Maalik Murphy. I know you're very interested in him when you were at Alabama. Can he be your quarterback of the future at the 40 acres? Within a month of Maalik Murphy's quarterback coach making that phone call, Maalik Murphy is committed to the University of Texas. But a few days before his signing day, Quinn Ewers takes an official visit to the University of Texas. The same Quinn Ewers that Maalik Murphy did not go to Ohio State because Quinn Ewers committed there. Now Quinn Ewers commits to the University of Texas. And everybody's blowing Maalik's phone up again, saying, hey, man, don't go down to the University of Texas. You know that's Quinn Ewers' job. You know you're not going to get a realistic chance to compete. But he sticks with his commitment and signs on the dotted line to come to the University of Texas. But then he comes to the University of Texas and he's dealing with an ankle injury. So bad that he can't compete in spring ball the way he wants to, right? Then he deals with a wrist injury from riding scooters and doesn't get a chance to compete for the backup job throughout the season. Then we think, okay, we're getting ready to see Maalik Murphy in spring ball this year. And we learn, finally, we have some clarification that somebody stepped on his foot during workouts, which is why he missed the first 3 spring practices. So Maalik Murphy came here to compete, but for over a year, he was unable to compete due to injuries. In the midst of this year, Arch Manning, probably the most talked about high school recruit ever, commits to the University of Texas as well. And Maalik Murphy's phone is blowing up again. Look, man, they're going to go from Quinn Ewers to Arch Manning. The fan base is saying it. ESPN is saying it. The talking heads on YouTube are saying it. You're the odd man out. If you want to compete, if you want to play college football, if you want to be a starter in college football, you're going to go elsewhere. You're good enough to play college football, but it likely won't be at the University of Texas because of Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. You are the odd one out. That's what everybody is telling him. And as an 18, 19-year-old, I'm sure he's seeing it on social media, right? He's getting on Twitter. He's getting on Instagram, seeing the same thing himself. Maalik Murphy had been completely taken out of the equation. So how does he respond to that? He comes out in the spring game and makes himself a household name. And now his phone is blowing up again, but for a different reason, right? Because now everybody's calling and saying, whoa, that performance you put on in the spring game, look, Quinn Ewers is going to be the starter next year, and there's no guarantee that you're going to beat out Arch Manning for the job next year. So why don't you come to this university right now where you have a realistic chance to compete for a starting job? Still people telling him that he has to go to another school to be able to play college football outside of the University of Texas. Still people now in his sophomore year of college putting their limitations on him. The same people that have been doing that since he was a sophomore in high school, right? So Maalik Murphy is getting all of this back channel communication from schools in the SEC, schools in the Pac-12, schools in the Big Ten, telling him to come be the starter or at least compete for a starting job right away, rather than sitting behind Quinn Ewers and competing. This is how it's being framed to Maalik Murphy, competing in air quotes for a job next year with Arch Manning. And once again, like he has done since his sophomore year of high school, beside that one time he didn't go to Ohio State because of Quinn Ewers, he said, no, thank you. I'm going to stay here and compete. And when Steve Sarkisian was asked about if he was surprised if Maalik Murphy had not entered the transfer portal yet, he said no, because we have a strong culture here. And culture is not something that you put up on a sign or a wall or you say in every press conference, but culture is about relationships, right? And we have really strong relationships in this building. And you could tell that the relationship that Maalik Murphy has with the staff, with the people at the University of Texas, with Steve Sarkisian and his teammates is the biggest reason he's still at the University of Texas. But also, when you see the mental fortitude, maturity, and poise of somebody like Maalik Murphy, who has had to drown out so much noise over the last 4 years and has had so many people trying to put their limitations on him, telling him what he can't do or telling him where he has to go to achieve his dreams as if he's incapable of doing it at the 40 acres. And for him to still be here after everything he's dealt with injury-wise and seeing 2 of the highest graded quarterbacks ever be brought into the room in an era where everybody bolts for the transfer portal as soon as things aren't ideal. And the fact that he's not only stood 10 toes down on his commitment to the University of Texas, but in the first chance we got to see him play actual football, he came out and shined in that opportunity. And now when everybody is coming at him from different angles, throwing money at him, saying you can come here and start right away, and so many people are saying he's not going to have a realistic chance to compete for the job next year because they didn't bring Arch Manning in to sit on the bench. And Maalik Murphy is still saying, no, I want to stay here and compete. I am so happy that Maalik Murphy chose to come to the University of Texas, and I am so happy that he is in a burnt orange and white jersey. And that type of maturity, that type of mental fortitude, that type of competitiveness, and that type of poise from somebody that young gives me all the confidence in the world that he will be a future star at the quarterback position in college football. A quick word from Built Bar, and then we're going to talk about Rodney Terry. He is killing it on the recruiting trail right now, bringing in 2 transfers just yesterday to the Texas basketball team. Looking for a delicious snack, but don't want all of the sugar and calories, that you need the best tasting protein bar ever built. You got to try this. If you're like me and you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, I've got just the thing for you. Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so amazing you won't think they're good for you. You got to try this. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they are all covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in amazing flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering Built Bars at Built.com, but now you can get them at Walmart or Sam's Club while still getting your specialty flavors at Built.com. So head to the website, head to Sam's Club, head to Walmart, wherever you get your Built Bars, and grab those today. I don't even know what to say about the Texas basketball program. I've said the last month covering this team has been such a roller coaster. It feels like one day, the fan base is excited about Rodney Terry, about what Rodney Terry is doing. And then the next day it's like, oh my God, what is Rodney Terry doing? Is he doing anything? We've had roller coasters of losing 5 players from the program to bringing in 3 players to the program in a week, and then losing Ron Holland 24 hours after Max Amos committed. And then this week, thankfully, the roller coaster is going up. It's on the incline because Zerik, Onyema, and Chendall Weaver have both committed to the 40 acres to play for Rodney Terry next year, and they both have multiple years of eligibility left. So this could be a situation like Christian Bishop, Timmy Allen, or Marcus Carr, where we see them at the 40 acres for more than 1 year. But I love both of these pickups, and we talked about both of these players earlier in the week when we learned that they would both be taking official visits to the 40 acres this week. And I think they bring 2 different things to this Texas basketball team, but 2 things that this Texas basketball team really needs as they fill out their roster for 2023. And of course, I want to give credit to Rodney Terry and his staff for continuing to do really good things on the recruiting trail. Of course, we live in a society where people want to point to the negatives and ignore the positives. I've seen more talk about losing A.J. Johnson and Ron Holland than I've seen about bringing in Max Amos, which is crazy. Like, I think people have forgotten who Max Amos is and what he's been in college basketball for the last 4 years at Oral Roberts. But that's just how society is now, right? We want to focus on what we don't have instead of what we do have. But on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we're going to focus on what we do have. And when you start with the Zerik Onyema, it's really kind of a cool scene that Rodney Terry has recruited him twice and landed him twice, right? How often does that happen? And in 2020, Rodney Terry recruited Zerik Onyema to UTEP. He played 5 games under Rodney Terry. Then Rodney Terry left to come join Chris Beard's staff. And now Zerik Onyema has left UTEP to play once again for Rodney Terry. And as I mentioned on the last episode, I think he brings a lot of what Christian Bishop brought to this team last year. When you look at Christian Bishop's averages, I don't even think they tell the story of what he brought to this team. I think he averaged 6 points and 3 rebounds in about 20 minutes per game. So when you look at Zerik Onyema's stats, he was at 7 points, 4.4 rebounds in about 17 minutes, right? So I think he had better stats than Christian Bishop in a little bit less time on the floor, right? But when you talk about what he brings, right? Energy, interior defense, right? Effort, rebounding. He also can score around the rim, right? He's not super skilled, but he does have a little hook shot he goes to around the rim, or he can just body you and back you down in the paint. But somebody that is going to bring a lot of intensity to this basketball team. He's going to definitely fit into RT's culture of defending at a high level. And like I said, he's just going to bring energy, rebounding, and defense, right? And you need that. Somebody that's going to be probably your backup big to Caden Shedrick and Dylan Dessou, and somebody that's going to bring that Brock Cunningham type effort with freaky athleticism, right? If you watch his highlight tape, every other play is a dunk, right? Because that's what he's going to do in the post. But just somebody that's going to make those winning plays, right? The plays that don't show up in the box score, but definitely affect the margins when you talk about winning. That's the type of player Zerik Onyema is, and I'm glad he made the decision to commit to Rodney Terry twice, this time at the University of Texas. And like I said, he can bring so much of what Christian Bishop did last year in that backup big role. And now you have a bigger front court than you did last year. And so Rodney Terry has really gone out into the portal and prioritized size. I mean, bringing in Caden Shedrick, who's almost 7 feet. You have Brock Cunningham, who kind of has miraged as a backup big, you know, the last few years, even though he's more of a wing. But now you got Zerik Onyema, somebody that plays bigger than 6'8", and will do that for this Texas basketball team next year, kind of like Christian Bishop did. When you talk about Chendall Weaver, he's somebody that was unranked coming out of Mansfield Timberview. That was a mistake because he was the WAC freshman of the year last year. I've seen some people say that we're getting excited about Rodney Terry bringing players from UTEP and UTA, but UTA just happens to be in the same conference that New Mexico State is in, and nobody complained about what Serge Rice did for this basketball team last year. I think his skill set translated. I think the same for Chendall Weaver. And like I said, this is somebody that's going to play at the guard position for you at the University of Texas for at least 2 years, I would think. Somebody that averaged almost 10 points a game last year, but only did it on 7 shots per game, had shooting splits of 44, 40, and 70, right? 44% from the field, 40% from the three-point line, and then 70% from the free throw line. But when you look at his 2-point splits and 3-point splits, he shot 47% from the mid-range and around the rim, 40% from the three-point line, and then 70% from the free throw line. And what I love about Chendall Weaver is he can play that off-guard role perfectly, right? You still remains to be seen if Tyrese Hunter is going to come back, but I think that's going to be the perfect role for him. But when you watch Chendall Weaver, he's a lot more aggressive than Tyrese Hunter is and was last year, right? He's somebody that when he gets the ball in his hands, he is going to take it to the rack. He plays above the rim at 6'3". He dunks the ball a lot as well, and he has no fear in terms of getting to the rim and trying to draw contact. And he was a 70% free throw shooter last year. I think he can improve on that. If you could shoot 40% from the three-point line, if you can shoot 40% from the three-point line, I think you can shoot more than 70% from the free throw line. So we'll see if he improves on that this year. But what I love most about him is, one, he already has chemistry with, maybe not on-court chemistry, but he already has a relationship with Max Amidst. They share a trainer. They're from the same area. But he plays so well off the ball. Not only does he do a good job of moving off the ball and moving off screens to get the ball, but his best asset is being a catch-and-shoot jump shooter, right? And he's a 40% three-point shooter, but most of the time that's coming off of passes, right? He's not going to be Max Amidst in terms of taking people off the dribble and getting his own shot. A lot of times he's going to be spotted up at the three-point line like we saw with, Tyrese Hunter and Serge Rice. And so if Max Amidst is going to be your primary ball handler and he's going to be coming off of pick and rolls with Dylan Dessou and Caden Shedrick or setting people up off the bounce, a lot of times you're going to see Chendall Weaver open at that three-point line ready to catch and shoot. And like I said, that's something that he did last year at a 40% clip. And I think in conference play, he actually shot 44% from three. So I think he upped it in conference play when the game started to matter a little bit more. And like I said, with Zerik Onyema and Chendall Weaver, these are both two pieces that you can build around for the future, right? Not just bring in this year and have them 1 year to try to win games, but they can become the foundation of your program, because I would assume that Zerik Onyema and Chendall Weaver will be on this Texas basketball team in 2024 as well in their first year in the SEC. So I love these two moves. I think there's two underrated moves in the transfer portal that really help you start to fortify your roster. Now you have 6 definitive rotation pieces on the Texas basketball team. You have Caden Shedrick, Dylan Dessou, Brock Cunningham, Max Amidst, Chendall Weaver, and Zerik Onyema. You still have the ability to get Dillon Mitchell to come back. We'll see how that happens. Tyrese Hunter is still an option to come back. We'll see what happens with that. And of course, I know that they're still putting a full court press on Ron Holland, who is considering Arkansas and the G League at this point, aside from the University of Texas. So I think they've done a really good job in the transfer portal of fortifying this roster. And of course, one of the biggest pieces was getting Dylan Dessou to come back. I still think even if you can get, you're not going to get all 3 back, right? That's probably not realistic. But if you can get even one of Dillon Mitchell, Ron Holland, or Tyrese Hunter back, I think that's a huge sign in terms of what this basketball team can look like next year. And then maybe you go fill in, 2 or 3 players from the portal, depending on how Rodney Terry wants the roster to look like. But I still have faith that this team can compete for a Big 12 championship next year. I still have faith that this team can compete for a Sweet 16 appearance next year. And I think bringing in 2 players like Zerik Onyema and Chendall Weaver, who are very talented players, but also the type of players that come in and help build and sustain your culture. I think Rodney Terry has done an excellent job on the recruiting trail, and hopefully he can continue to fortify this roster and solidify that going into the 2023 season. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we're going to talk about the Texas baseball team really quickly, heading to Kansas this weekend for a weekend series. So when we talk about the Texas baseball team, it's kind of been a roller coaster of a season, similar to the Texas basketball team, because they started off under 500. I think they started off 7-11 or 4-7 through 11 games. It was something like that. They weren't great, right? And then they go on a 16-game win streak where they really didn't play anybody. All the games were at home, but they took care of business, right? And won the games they were supposed to win. And then they looked pretty good throughout conference play, right? Maybe not the team that we saw last year, but I thought for the most part, they were better than worse, right? In terms of conference play. But then they kind of ran into a rough stretch where the starting pitchers in the bullpen just lost the ability to throw strikes. That happens, right? Whether you're having mechanical issues and just can't get the ball in the zone, or you're scared of what might happen when you throw the ball in the zone. I completely understand, right? And so they lost the ability to throw strikes. And we saw that in the Baylor series where they gave up 11 runs in the first 2 games in the 9th inning, right? Collectively. And then we saw that in the Oklahoma series where they got swept, right? They had 1 game and then 2 games during a doubleheader and got swept. That should never happen at the University of Texas. The University of Texas is the gold standard of collegiate baseball, right? And then we saw 2 games in between against Abilene Christian and Texas Southern where they blew out those teams. I think they beat Abilene Christian 20-0. I think they beat my alma mater, Texas Southern. Shout out my HBCU. 18-3, right? But you couldn't really take anything from those games because there was such a lower level of talent than what you had been playing in Big 12 conference play. And then you start off the first 2 games against TCU and you look really good, right? You beat them the first game, I think, by 5 runs. The second game, you end the game on one of the best defensive plays you'll see in college baseball this season, the double play on a sac fly attempt by downtown Porter Brown. But then you come back in the 3rd game, the Monday game. It's a little weird. It's a matinee. It's like 1 o'clock. And Tanner Witt is your opener, not your starter, your opener. And I think that kind of threw off the team, right? Especially when Tanner Witt went out there and didn't even give you the full inning that you were hoping for, right? I just think that kind of threw off the mojo of the pitching staff and the rotation and the bullpen. You ultimately give up 15 runs in that game, right? And lose to TCU, even though you had already clinched and won the series. So we'll take series wins. TCU is a really good team. You can't be mad about losing the series 2-1 to them, even though you were up 2-0 and going for the sweep. So now you face off against Kansas on the road. And I don't know much about Kansas, the baseball team, but when I look at their record, I see they have a losing record overall, and they have a losing record in conference play. So I think Texas needs to head to Kansas, right, on a road environment. That's never easy, but I think they need to at least take 2 out of 3, right? I'm never going to call for a sweep when you're playing in conference play. These are good Power 5 teams as well, and they're out there trying to win games just like the Texas Longhorns are as well. But they should go out there and at least win 2 out of 3 and just get back on track. Like I said, it's not so much more about the record at this point, right? Or, competing for a Big 12 championship or a regional or a super regional, because as long as you have a path, then you can compete and you control your own destiny for a national championship. What I think they need to do, especially with the influx now of getting Tanner Witt back, is just focus on playing their best baseball, right? The pitching staff, they have to throw strikes and get outs, right? The defense, they have to make plays, right? Not allow errors, make plays when they're there. The offense has been hitting on all cylinders, but they have to continue to do that, right? Put together really good at-bats, draw walks, pass the baton. And when you can hit the ball out of the ballpark, do that as well. So I think that this Texas baseball team is in a good spot. Maybe they don't have the ceiling of some other Texas baseball teams we've seen, but if they can start to gel and play really good baseball, which they have been doing outside of a tough 2-week stretch, but if they can get back to that baseball they were playing before that and hit on all cylinders, like I said, this time last year is when Ole Miss and Oklahoma really jumped on the scene. Maybe the Texas Longhorns can be that Oklahoma or Ole Miss this year and end up in the national championship game in the College World Series. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Maalik, you are a Longhorn. Chendall, you are a Longhorn. Zerik, Onyema, you are a Longhorn. Hook 'em and peace.